Nice, great. Yes. Okay, fantastic. So, welcome everyone. Welcome back to day six of 25 Days, 25 Skills for Educators series, the Teachers Training Talks series with Preethi Sunallinii from I Integrated Parenting and Garima is with me from Authenticity. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that is often very much underrated and overlooked, that is
Mhm.
burnout for educators, right? Today we want to talk about what does it take to protect our emotional energy. What is it that a teacher has to face, an educator has to face? What are the consequences? Now, when we talk about burnout, a common question that comes up is, what is fatigue and what is burnout? At what stage do I consider myself to have gone beyond the stage of being tired and fatigued to feeling burnt out, right? So, in general, fatigue and tiredness is more to do with the physical strain. You've not slept enough, you've not had enough rest, you're standing all day. So, there is that fatigue. You just want to sit, you just want to close your eyes. That is the physical fatigue. More often than not, when you rest, when you sleep it off, you do feel better, right? But burnout is more of a mental strain where you feel mentally drained. Even a good night's sleep, 8 hours, 9 hours of sleep, you still wake up feeling kind of sluggish, lethargic. The day feels like a drab. Burnout is basically every day you're burning your emotional and mental energy. You keep burning it, and over a period of time, you feel burnt out. The fuel that keeps you inspired and motivated and energized through the day is all burnt out. That is burnout in a certain sense, right? You must have definitely had this experience if you're an educator where you're waking up feeling tired, feeling emotionally drained, and it is not about what happened yesterday or day before yesterday. You probably have had like a 2 3 day gap, but it's still not enough. Somewhere it feels like some kind of a stress is building up, class after class, day after day, one student issue after another, and it is accumulated over time, right? What it has done is it has emptied our cup. We must all have heard of this phrase, you can't pour from an empty cup. And in spite of that, that is a situation for many, many teachers today. And I was talking to Garima before today's talk as well. One thing that I realized was more and more schools are talking about teachers dropping off lately, right? And the issue of not having enough staff is also an increasingly common issue, right? We are constantly looking out for more teachers, but there are less and less available, at least one that will fill all the criteria to fit the role that we are actually wanting to hire. This seems to be another common theme in many schools today. Why is that happening? What are the stressors that are causing burnout? What is happening in this area? That is what we want to be talking about today. So, as we take off, let's hear from you as well, Garima. Anything that you'd like to add to this?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the space, Preeti. And like you rightly set the context, one key differentiator that was very important to establish is that we are not talking about day to day tiredness. We are not talking about day to day disinterest or fatigue. We are talking about uh, an unalignment, misalignment that's sustained over a period of time for us to reach a place where we feel that something's off. Something's off to an extent that I can't keep going on. There is either a leakage or there is some stuckness or some misalignment that's not working out. Now, I myself in my career of the last 2 decades have experienced something of this sort more from a corporate lens, where I was very aware of what my role is, what it demands of me, what am I supposed to do, what are the boundaries that I must draw to be able to work efficiently, what are the places where I'm saying a yes, where in my heart and my head I mean a no, or I feel a no. And it was situations getting out of my hand where I felt that, so many yeses when I don't mean them. It was eroding my own authenticity, and that's how I pivoted right from that space. Now that feeling of burnout is something that I've experienced, and I'm sure that is exactly what any professional experiences, be it any space that they are in. But what's specific with educators, because I am also one, I'm influencing that space and I'm operating in that spaces, a teacher is far more exposed throughout the day to a public environment. There are too many stakeholders. There are students, of course, front facing. There is an administration. There are peers, subordinates, and seniors in that system. And then there is an external environment as well, where there are parents, there are prospective job interviewers, there are industry visits and stuff. Because if I talk at a higher education perspective, so a teacher needs to operate in that environment as well. Whereas the profession in itself demands a lot of solitary time, demands a lot of academic research, demands a lot of intellectual investment. So while it demands a lot of solitary pondering on so many subjects and depth in what you do, the environment, does it really support it? Is the question. And therefore, uh, apparent uh, appearance of burnout or fatigue or tiredness is something that's very possible. Another thing is that in a corporate where the interaction is limited with stakeholders, right? You can sit behind a computer and you can do your job as well in certain spaces and places. A teacher's job is a very public dealing kinds, right? At all given point of time, I'm in interaction, I'm in exchange. Even walking down the corridor, I can't be in my thoughts, right? Because there could be students passing by, there could be headmistress passing by, there could be other people. So to be very aware and agile and available to public exchange at all given point of time. So it completely depends on who you are as a person. What are your energizers and what are your drainers in terms of your own energy for you to be able to create that fine balance so as to be available purposefully, efficiently, effectively to the role that you are playing. And like you and me, Preeti, we were discussing, there are so many factors. Burnout, the term in itself suggests that it's not any one unidimensional, it's multi-dimensional, right? The job that I'm doing, the subject that I'm teaching, the emotional boundaries that I've laid out for myself, the remuneration that I get, because at the end of the day, that is also an exchange. The policies of the institution or the organization that I'm attaching myself to, I need to be in alignment with all of this. My purpose needs to be aligned with all of this to be able to fulfill the job that I'm doing. And therefore, the burnout can be very, very real. Yeah. So, yeah, those are my initial thoughts on the subject per se. And we don't let it be easy for our teachers also, be it students. We want to give our teachers a tough time and, play around a little, be notorious in our classes, or be inquisitive and curious and really, really get into that space of intellectual debate and discussion, or get that energy from our educator. Same as with parents, same as with every other stakeholder. But what is that sanctuary of mine where I sit in alignment and refill my cup, like you rightly said? And that's where the role of drawing boundaries come in. That's where the role of methodologies for emotional regulation comes in. That's where mindful alignment with the larger purpose comes in. That is where also the conversation of policy, remuneration, teacher training, teacher upskilling comes in. Because you can't expect an individual without having the the necessary support and environment to thrive. It is a complex job at the end of the day. Last thing that I want to say before I hand it over to you. Gone are the days when it was assumed that teaching is the easiest profession, at least for females. Oh, it's just a half day job, yeah. You're also going to get your summer vacations and holidays and stuff like that. So it's the best and easiest profession that you can have. If you want to manage a family life, if you want to manage a child, and if you want to also have a career of your own, then get into teaching. Gone are those days. I'm sure it was even difficult at that point of time, but it's only getting more complex now. It is a 9 to 5 job. Even when the classes end at 2, 2:33 in the afternoon, the teacher needs to still do her reports, her checks and balances, her preparation of the lesson of the next day, and her own upskilling and reskilling and learning. So it's becoming it's as equivalent to any corporate job. Yeah. We'll come into the point of parent investment and intervention also, another aspect that's growing. But before that, I'd love for you to talk about these things, that themes and topics that we've unpacked, and if there is more that adds to the overall burnout conversation from your perspective.
Yeah, I think pretty much drawing from all of the points that you beautifully listed, giving it a certain structure, what comes up is the overwhelming workload, right?
Mm,
There are heavy teaching hours, and then
mm,
there are also a lot of non-teaching tasks that come up, right? Like curriculum planning and education, exam management, perhaps data entry to some extent. And in some schools, you probably have to get into some kind of government related work, election duty and this, that, and the other. Like there are a whole lot of things that come into the purview of a teacher's day. That
yeah,
is not always what you expect in the role of a teacher,
yeah.
right? And this overload many times also gets carried over to the home front or beyond the school hours, right? I
Mm,
was talking to my um, son about his teachers. I think I was listening to some podcast around educators and educators challenges, something I was listening to. My son was, what is this, what are you listening to? And then I said, what they're saying is this is what happens. What time do you go to school? But when you go to school, everything is prepped and everything is decorated, everything is in
mm,
its place. Who do you think makes sure does that? Right? So
yeah.
teachers have to come into the classroom way before the children, and they
Yeah.
leave the school way after the children are gone. So like you said, it's definitely no more limited to, okay, when children are there, that's when you turn up, and when children are gone, your job is it just does not
Work like that.
end there today, right? And today, another thing is the amount of catching up there is to do, right?
Mm, mm,
The
mm, mm,
size of the classrooms are also increasing. We have 40 children, 50 children, 80 children in some classrooms, right?
mm,
And that's a lot. We have parents, as parents, we have one, two, three children are like, "Arey yaar, when is this summer vacation going to be done?" And we have teachers who are dealing with children throughout the day. Like you said, it's
true.
a very, very people centric role, right? You're always around humans, you're always around children. And there is a big difference between interacting with chunumunus like LKG, UKG, primary, and elementary versus how it is dealing with adolescents, the 5 to 5th standard to 7th standard and 8th, 9th, 10th. Well, the entire environment is different. And if you look at the role of a teacher as well, let's say your subject matter expertise is perhaps chemistry or science, you come in for science. But today, if you ask a lot of schools, a lot of teachers, they will say, no, I actually came in here for math, but the only role that was available was physics. Or no, 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 I
Yeah,
used to be a physics teacher, but since the maths teacher left, they're asking me to jump in here. It's not something I
yeah,
want to do, but I don't have a choice. Right?
yeah.
So today, when we're talking about understaffed and overworked and these jumping roles, the amount of catching up there is to do is crazy.
It's
And not to
unreal.
mention, imagine being in the middle of a sea of king, 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 king. Through the day, right? It can get to you. Like you said, we all need that quiet. We all need that opportunity to shut off and get some quiet for ourselves. And for many teachers, that is not a reality. And I'm talking about a whole range of schools, not just a particular set of schools. We have, the entry level schools, the mid level schools, and then we also have the international elite sort of schools, right? In Especially in the mid-range schools, for sure, I know this is the reality, right, where
Hmm.
they are definitely understaffed and overworked. So which means one teacher is expected to fill in the roles of multiple educators, multiple teachers.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's not easy for them to take off, because
Hmm.
already they are understaffed. And if the teacher takes off because they're sick, how are they going to hand it over to somebody else who's going to fill in? There's going to be more
Hmm.
chaos that day. So it's not easy to apply for leave, to take time off for themselves, right? And yes, like you also brought up, the amount of emotional labor that goes into the role of a teacher, right? Many times they're dealing with teenagers. They're also dealing with these children in 10, 11, 12, in that pre-adolescence phase. They do have to step into some extent a counselor counseling kind of a role, where they have to hold space for these children, right? And for the even younger children, though, they have to be everything. They have to be the nanny, they have to be the caretaker, they have to do a whole lot of things, from wiping their noses to packing their bags. There is so much more and fewer hands, right? And if we have to talk about the ROI in terms of finances, I think that's a whole different topic altogether. From what I have
Absolutely.
heard from, at least most of the teachers that I've spoken to, it is not a very well paid job as such. This is definitely not to put down the profession as such, but it is a very real issue, right? We may say, yes, it's a passionate job, we're doing it for the heart, all of that said and done. If you look at the pay scale, the higher the classes that you teach, the higher your pay. But the truth
Hmm.
is, the more labor is in the lower classes, right?
Yes.
If you can set the foundation right for LKG, UKG, in the primary, pre-primary range, of simple things of discipline, folding your own lunchbox and packing your bag,
Hmm.
and you sit in one
Hmm.
place, you talk to people, certain basic manners. That is the foundation. Everything else is built on that. And yet they are the most least paid of all the teachers in a classroom. And unfortunately, in many cases, primary school teachers end up being primary school teachers because they didn't
There
find
was no.
anything.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And that's a very sad state of affairs. The higher you go, middle school, higher school, you cross that, you go into college level, the pay only keeps increasing.
Hmm.
And there is more self study for children than the dependency on the educator, on the teacher, keeps reducing as the classes go higher and higher, but the pay keeps increasing. And the
Hmm.
lower it is, children are so much more dependent on you to spoon feed you, right? To give you literally everything that needs to be done on the board in their book. Imagine we have teachers who are sitting and writing 25, 30
Right.
diaries every day, right? They have to plan for not just a lesson plan, but also to, now there is this whole movement around hands-on teaching hona hai. We have to be giving them more projects and multi-sensory input and stuff like that. So which means teachers need to upskill themselves in terms of not just enough that I impart this, but I also need to give them activities to assess how much they've learned. And I need to take it back for correction individually. And a lot of times this happens back home and not within the class because there's not enough time. There's just not enough time. Right? So these are small little things. It might seem like, okay, this is just one small bit. Oh, this is just one more. This is another one small bit. But it all adds up to a very giant monster that really takes up a whole lot of space in our lives, leaving little for ourselves, right?
True.
And that is a risk that many teachers do run into, especially when they're not careful enough, to draw the line, like you said, to be able to say no. Just like
Hmm.
any other job, teachers also get piled on for one thing after another, which are not necessarily um, teaching related, non-teaching tasks, admin related work, for example, like,
True.
you
Yeah.
go find
Yeah.
a certification somewhere, or you need to get some signature from somebody else, or you need to create a proposal for something, or you have to plan day out for the children. All of these sort of things, which are not necessarily teaching related, also gets piled on because you keep saying yes. And I also noticed this very interestingly, that many teachers are people pleasers. I know this is
Yeah.
like a blanket statement, but many teachers tend to want to say yes. They're committed, they're hardworking, they're absolutely passionate about what they do. They want to give the best for the children under their care. And so they find it really hard to say no. They keep saying yes. They keep saying yes. And
Hmm.
the more they say yes, and the better they are at delivering what is asked, the more that gets piled on for them.
Hmm. Hmm.
And before you know it, you're under this huge pile that you did
Snowballed
not
into a big issue.
expect to
Yeah.
be yours.
Yeah.
So, learning to say no, learning to identify when you want to draw that line,
Hmm.
how you want to draw that line,
Hmm.
and also finding time for yourself
Yeah.
during the day. These are some of the things I think we definitely have to look into, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
What according to you are some things that teachers could do to ensure that they
Yeah.
don't head towards burnout?
Correct. Correct. As I'm listening to you, Preeti, I think first a little bit of housekeeping in terms of issues. Yeah, there is a pay uh,
Mm,
satisfaction, dissatisfaction conversation. There's a role uh, purview conversation. What falls in my role? What goes beyond my role?
mm,
Then there is a conversation of the whole administration and dealing with different stakeholders of my role
mm,
conversation. Then there is a conversation of time and energy management, right?
mm,
And what I'm realizing increasingly as you're talking about it, why, yes, there are certain tools and techniques that I can utilize as an educator to align myself with whatever my environment is, which is in my hand, right? But another very important part of this entire conversation is effective communication.
mm,
Effectively communicating what you are feeling or where
mm,
you are at to
mm,
your stakeholders, be it
mm,
the students, be it the administration, be it the
mm,
third very big stakeholder in this entire conversation, which is parents.
mm,
The reason why a lot of teachers become people pleasers or yes people is because they just do not know or they're not equipped with the right vocabulary, language, articulation, ability to maneuver a conversation and bring it to a point where they tactfully say no, not to sound abruptly wanting to brush aside a job or not take it, but to make the other person understand where he or she, as a educator, is coming from. Say, for example, if there is an administrative task that you are loaded with,
mm,
and you already have certain things on your plate, and this is a very simple business principle, right? If you are a well planned, highly productive professional, then you most often than not, you and I, we were having a conversation about how just tech failed you this morning and you right now do not have
mm,
a clear view of your calendar, right? And
mm,
that flustered you. But the fact that you follow a calendar
mm,
tells me that you are a well planned, mindful professional, right?
mm,
Now, if suddenly something comes at 4 o'clock in the evening on your plate, you would already know what your 4 to 6 last slot of the working day looks like. What can you
mm,
accommodate? What you can't accommodate. And not just what, you also know the why of it and you also know the how of you're going to manage that situation. Now, teachers are no different in terms of being professionals. If you equip yourself with some basic productivity tools and you equip yourself with the basic understanding of effective communication, then drawing these boundaries is easier because there is an unsaid hierarchy, there is this unsaid authority. Even when you sit for parents teacher interactions or when you look at teacher administration examples, somewhere a teacher is mostly at the receiving end. Well, we discussed this earlier also that you should not attach your personal performance to a child's performance, but you may like it or not like it. That's something that's assumed to be your responsibility. I have a class of 40 students, 50 students, 30 students, whatever. Even 50% of my class is above average, is not good enough these days. We want everybody to be an alpha. We want everybody to be a leader. We want everybody to be a orator. We want everybody to be a fantastic business leader. We want everybody to become the next scientist and the next doctor and the next engineer. While there are artists, dreamers, and what's wrong with being a follower also in a class? But as a teacher, when you sit with a parent, every parent wants to hear the best story about their child. They do not want to accept that, Arey, 70%, why he or she should score this much in every subject. Now, if you are not able to communicate what you're feeling effectively at that point of time, if you are not able to detach your performance from the child's performance, it's a dual dialogue. One is what's happening inside your head. How does one become a people pleaser? Is when you start attaching your self worth and your self concept to how it's positioned outside, right? If you are clear that I'm doing my job well, I know what my day looks like. I'm in control of where this whole conversation is coming from. Very little chance that something external can completely disrupt it. Yes, there can be some oddballs that come your way that you need to hit and figure out what shot to take. But largely, you would know the game that you're playing. But if you're underprepared, both in your head, in your mind space, in your physical space, in your emotional space, then the chances of going off road is very, very high, especially when it's coming from a place of authority, especially when it's coming from a place of uh, emotionally invested, highly activated parent group or something of that sort, right? So, and this is no different from any other profession, honestly. This ability to be grounded in your reality, this ability to be in control of your emotional regulation, this ability to plan your day in a fashion that at least 70 to 80% of the day is in your control or is managed by you is something that any and every profession demands. And every professional should work towards. Just what makes teaching different is the greater degree of purpose attached to it, is the greater degree of emotional investment attached to it, is the greater degree of softer nuances of nurturing, motherhood, mentorship, let alone everything else. Yeah, just the fact that you are throughout your career operating with that, for want of a better word, I don't want to call it a load or a burden, but the responsibility, you're wearing that hat of being the role model throughout. I was talking to my niece yesterday, really young kid, 4 year old. She was wearing lipstick and heels and TikToking in the house yesterday. And my cousin, whose daughter she is, was telling me that, she keeps enacting like her teacher. She keeps playing teacher, teacher all day. Teacher, teacher is a game that I think at least, I don't know about boys, but girls for sure
Yes.
have embodied their teachers. This is how she dresses, this is how she talks, this is how she looks. And that is such a subtle mirroring that
Mm.
keeps going on throughout. What you're wearing, how you're turning up, how you talk, how you stand, how you, the body language. It's a privilege. And that's why I don't want to call it a burden, but the fact remains that every day, when you know that this entire section of young ones are modeling you, then it's so much more important for you to keep your emotional hygiene and your mental hygiene in your control rather than give away the remote control to anyone and everyone around you. Like I'm saying, even as a corporate employee, even as a administrative employee, even as anybody, yeah, even as homemakers, you're a family therapist. So
Yeah,
many times we have these conversations amongst couples
yeah,
that
yeah.
you are responsible for your happiness, you
Yeah.
are responsible for your grounding. So while we
Pretty much.
understand all of this, yeah,
Go
come in. Yes, I'm just saying that added burden or that added responsibility, accountability, ownership of being role models for not just the students, not just the parents, but the society.
on. Mm.
My point is, let's cut teachers a little slack and let them be a little more and design environments where they can also thrive.
Yeah. I think from everything that you have spoken, if I can condense that into what simple ways, three simple ways that teachers
Yeah,
can avoid burnout is one. From what you've spoken, three things that I could pick up was one was boundaries with time, setting clear boundaries with time with respect to your school, your home, taking time out for yourself as well, learning to say no to
hmm,
your higher ups, to parents, perhaps even to your own, unrealistic expectations. And the third thing that I picked up was to prioritize your own self, prioritize self care, right? I think it wouldn't be a stretch if I went so far as to say prioritize self care like it was a lesson plan. Right? That is where emotional hygiene, I love that word that you brought in. That is where I think emotional hygiene becomes part of the routine so that you're able to show up in a way that you want your students to see and model from you.
yeah, yeah.
Hi, is there anything else that you would like to add to
Awesome,
this with?
awesome. No, absolutely. You've done a fantastic job of recapping that and distilling that really in these 3 points. The only thing that if I can add to it, all of this will only become possible when you change the language that you use for yourself and for the people around you. The art of communicating what you're feeling to your own
Mm,
self, because at times we feel very guilty acknowledging that we need a break. We feel
mm,
very guilty drawing a boundary.
mm,
Yeah. So, so it's about changing your own internal environment and being okay with that narrative to begin with. And then,
mm.
like you said, then making and embracing as if it was your own self care being a lesson plan. That's like beautifully put. That's lovely. And then coming to a place where, with confidence, with conviction, with humility, with love and kindness, you're able to communicate it to the stakeholder environment so that everybody else is also on board with you and you're able to create an environment that helps you thrive and helps the students thrive.
Absolutely. I think with that, it is also, this is also something if we are looking at somebody who's already in a burnout stage, also this particular, especially this part applies, right? If
Hmm,
you're
hmm.
already in a space where you're feeling drained, you don't know why the heck you're doing this, where this is all going, where do I start? So that's the burnout phase that you're beginning into, coming into. How do you get out of there? First and foremost would be to seek help, right? To reconnect with your support system. It could be your colleagues, it could be your friends, it could be your family. To tell them what you can and cannot take up on your plate, perhaps tell them that this is it, I
Yeah,
can't do
yeah,
more than
yeah.
this. At this point in time, I'm emotionally in a lower bandwidth and I need that support right now. And I think asking for help takes a lot of courage, especially so for teachers, because they're always in the place of giving help.
Giving it. Yes, yes, yes,
So
yes.
absolutely. I think in that line, if to continue that conversation to what else can be done to get out of a burnout phase, would be to practice what I like to call as deep rest and deep recharge, right?
Hmm.
It's not just sleep, it's more than just sleeping and taking time off. It's almost like you're scheduling time not to think about work, not to think about anything that drains you, right? One of the things that I also encourage people to do is, before you get into your classroom, before you have to leave to school, make sure to do at least one thing that you truly enjoy for yourself. It could be simply having a cup of chai in the balcony, wake up before your partner, your child, have that cup of tea for yourself, have that silence. Maybe you want to do a little bit of coloring and mandala. And I remember one teacher, she said she really, really loves talking to her plants. So every day she would spend 10 to 15 minutes on the terrace just with her plant. So anything at all that really nurtures your soul, that makes you smile, that you really look
Basically,
forward to it.
you're telling me
Finds
that I should fill my cup before I go forth.
absolutely, yes, very much, right? So doing that kind of brings up something that you can look forward to. It can become your anchor for the day. It's a great grounding experience. Anything that you do repeatedly, routines in a certain sense, are a fantastic way to ground yourself. Routines ground us, right? And I'm sorry, am I visible? Okay, I okay, I can see that Garima seems to have gotten dropped off before she jumps in. So, to sum up, right? One is deep rest and deep recharge, which means it is not just about sleep, but also to genuinely take the time where you're not working, not thinking about your work, but allowing your mind and your body to rest. It could also be, taking a day off. You have a day off, and don't fill that day with house cleaning and other things to do. Engage in a hobby, things that you love to do to rejuvenate yourself. Second, like Garima brought up, is definitely to look at how you can reconnect with your support system, to ask for help. Many times when we feel burnt out, we often feel isolated, lonely, like the entire burden is on us, right? You don't have to feel that way. Ask for help. Delegate as much as possible, within or outside your teaching system, the education system itself, your school work itself. How much of it can you lessen for yourself? Where can you take help? Last but not the least, that I would like to ask, that I would like to add, is to seek professional guidance, to seek professional help. And as schools, can we also take responsibility for the mental health of our teachers? Like I said, I think in the last session, the mental conditions, the emotional conditions of our teacher, the working conditions of our teachers is the learning conditions of our children. If we're doing what we're doing for our children, taking care of our teachers and their mental health is also for our children. All right. With that, I think we will conclude for today. As always, if you have any questions, anything in particular that you would like us to cover, feel free to DM us, put it down in the comments, and we will be happy to take that. Thank you so much for joining us today. Looks like Garima is not being able to come back in. Must be a technical glitch. Nevertheless, thank you for staying this long, staying till the end. Thank you so much for today, and we will see you tomorrow again. Have a great day.